The Isle has been described in many ways during the multiple years of its development, and throughout all that time it established itself as the main catalyst for the birth of the subgenre that we all now know and the one this game is most recognized, the Dinosaur survival. But this title in particular isn't just that. Many times you might have heard people sneak in yet another descriptive term to categorize what the Isle really is, and that little term is horror. Survival horror is a very unexplored and scarce type of game, but they do exist, with The Forest and Subnautica being the best and most popular examples. And while they do explore that subgenre in different ways, both belong to that spectrum, and to many people, the Isle, especially Rima, is also part of that group. And honestly, it all points out to be the case. There are many different elements that, in conjunction, display this perspective to players, but below the surface is where the truth lies, and the truth is that the Isle is not a survival horror, and I'm going to explain why. Horror games, no matter how different they might be built, have one and only objective: to scare the player. Everything from their core design, the atmosphere, the theme, mechanics, narrative, pacing, every single component is tailored with the intent of generating fear. That genre, if well done, can heavily impact the people that play them, because they are utilizing one of the most primal human emotions to deliver a very well-crafted experience. Some survival titles used that concept and homogenized it with their already existing gameplay loop in order to enhance their game. In fact, many, if not all genres at some point, used horror for that same purpose. Of course, like I said before, there is a spectrum inside this category. Some use horror in a more subtle way through themes and atmosphere like Don't Starve, and others fully embrace it and use fear to its maximum extent like Dead Space. Not all games that use horror elements utilize it to its fullest extent, but they all take advantage of it to enhance their product. And here's where the Isle comes in. It is very easy to look at the game and immediately say that it's similar to the other titles I previously mentioned. A lot of blood and gore, the map can be claustrophobic, nighttime is extremely dark, growth gives a sense of vulnerability when we are young. These are most likely the arguments you see whenever the discussion is brought up. But even though they appear to coincide with the characteristics that we expect to experience in horror games, these reasons are actually flawed from the start. Let's debunk them one by one, beginning with the first one: gore. Visceral spectacle is often associated with this genre. Blood, human blood especially, has a subconscious effect on our brains. It makes us uncomfortable, tense, or even anxious. It sets a dark, violent, and macabre precedent for things to come. But is it really though? Gore does have the potential to deliver those feelings, and to an extent it tends to go down that route. But gore alone is not enough to cause those sensations. And here's a great example of exactly that: Team Fortress 2. A classic and extremely popular team-based shooter which so happens to have quite a lot of blood and gore. It is actually pretty common and frequent. Hell, they even highlight your fragmented body parts whenever you die violently. See? Your head is over here. So here's the question: is TF2 a horror shooter? Of course not. Why? Because nothing surrounding that feature inspires fear. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The entire game has a very comical cartoon theme on most aspects. The art style, the dialogue, character design, The overall atmosphere is very lighthearted, and if anything, the gore present during those matches further emphasizes the old style of comedy rather than taking it away. If there's nothing to support it, the initial premise these assets would have are either nullified or even changed completely, and in the Isle that support is just not there. You are an animal that will kill or be killed by other players who are themselves also animals. This is a game of survival in the purest sense of the word. There, gore enhances not the horror of the game, but rather its raw essence, the cruel and savage nature of the wild. It elevates the primal instincts of kill or be killed, and because the game functions in that way, as a survival game, the horrific nature gore inherently has is changed into something different. However, this is not the only argument used to defend the notion that the Isle has horror. The map itself is also mentioned. Isla Spiro can deliver a sense of isolation and perhaps even claustrophobia in the dense jungles that cover the island. But those phenomena are not the outcome of deliberate design. They are the outcome of a bad map. Everyone knows at this point that Spiro is by far the worst map afterthought ever constructed. You may like it, the map may even be pretty, but on a level design standpoint, it is absolutely abhorrent. Players often feel alone in Spiro not because it was specifically crafted to captivate isolation. Players feel that due to the sheer size of the map in comparison to the server's population. The island is simply too vast for 100 players to cover all of it evenly. You are either in the center with 90% of the server, or you are anywhere else with no signs of life on site. That is simply the result of bad design. And even if this was intentional, even if this was made this way with the goal to cause fear through isolation, the execution was absolutely terrible, and in the end, we got a bad map which vastly diminishes the player's experience. In the Isle, isolation doesn't make us fearful, it makes us bored, lost, and frustrated. And lastly, it's time to talk about the darkness of the night. This is the biggest argument in favor of the survival horror label for the game. A year ago I made a video regarding the new night vision that was implemented alongside the 5.5 update. Go take a look if you're curious. And in there, not only I talked about the fear factor that nighttime is intended to deliver, but most importantly, how the Isle fundamentally does not synergize with horror based on its mechanics and gameplay loop. Like I said over 12 months ago, horror requires the player to feel vulnerable and powerless in its environment. In traditional horror, this is done in multiple ways, being either invincible antagonists, panic-inducing events or scenery, and vision impairment mechanics. What makes you fear your surroundings is both the unknown and your incapability of defending yourself. This is why the Doom series is not considered horror despite having more gore, violence, and hellish atmosphere than any other title I talked about until now. Doom is horror themed, but not actual horror, because there's no feeling of vulnerability. You are not defenseless. You have the strength and tools to overcome any obstacle you come across. In-game, you don't fear hell, hell fears you. And a similar concept happens in Evrima. While you're extremely vulnerable growing up, once you become an adult specimen, you obtain the power and tools to survive. The things that previously made you hesitate and hide no longer pose a threat, or they become a threat that is now defeatable. The Isle does have an ominous theme around its lore. It can have some scary moments whenever you get caught by a dino. You may even be fearful whenever you are nothing but a hatchling. But those moments don't make the game a survival horror. The Isle is a raw and crude dinosaur survival. Nothing more, nothing less. The developers may want it to be, and they may even been trying to achieve it, but as of yet, they didn't succeed, and without major changes in its core design and gameplay loop, that is something the Isle will never be. Now, if you excuse me, I have a boss to beat. A huge thank you to my Patreon supporters for supporting the channel and the content I create. If you wanna join the ranks, you can do so for only $1 a month, the link will be in the description. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and opinions down below, join our Discord server for memes and Paleonut stuff, and I hope to see you all next week.